On a night in St. Louis where it was just about as close to a must-win scenario that you can get without being mathematically eliminated, the Blues fall just short in Game 2 in the first round of the Stanley Cup Playoffs by a final score of 2-1. This is the Blues Hub Postgame Show. I'm your host, Ethan Hannaford, joined tonight by the great Mike Claiborne, as well as Thomas Welch and Jacob Stanoch. We will break it all down in just a moment. But a quick reminder first that the Blues Hub Postgame Show is sponsored by Hot Shots here on Sports Hub STL, presented by DraftKings. The crown is yours. Tough one tonight for St. Louis. It was a back-and-forth game throughout. The energy was clearly very intense in Winnipeg for a second straight game. That's one thing you can most definitely expect from those fans. They brought it once again tonight, and the Blues did as well, just as mentioned, fell a little bit short. I'll start off with you, Claibs. Initial thoughts on tonight's loss for St. Louis?
Well, I thought it was a good game. Both teams skated hard. I think, though, when people look at games like this is why you can't play this style 82 games. The physical play in the first period and part of the second period is why the Blues had nothing left in the latter part of the third period. Playing the body the way they did, letting the officials, who I thought called a great game, they let guys play. They called it by the book as well, where nobody had a chance to take liberties. Nobody was looking to fight. Some guys got exposed with regard to youth and indecisions that took place. But I thought overall, Blues, it was a winnable game. Obviously, Binnington made it close. But I'm not one that gives up after being down 2-0. I think, you have to – the series doesn't start until you win in the other guy's building. I mean, that's the way it's always been, and I know the percentages go up when you have a 2-0 lead, but you haven't done anything that wasn't expected of you. You won in your own building. Now take that to St. Louis and see what happens there. You got a couple of days off. You can rest up because the Blues can't play this pace for 7 games. They physically can't hold up. I don't know how they're going to keep Braden Shin glued together because the way he's throwing his body around, this is something they can't maintain, especially when it comes to going to the net. And this is what's caught up to the Blues. And you guys have seen enough games this year. They're a really good perimeter team. They don't have enough guys who can crash a net and willing to pay that price. And it's showing because when you look at how big Winnipeg's defense core is, Hellebuyck doesn't have to worry about a rebound. He doesn't have to worry about a second save because there isn't anybody in position to get one.
And we saw that a lot, especially later in the game as well. It felt like every single entrance for St. Louis was one and done. Felt like the chances early in this one were a little bit stronger. The Blues started off fast in tonight's game. Thomas, what did you take, Thomas, from the quick start for St. Louis? Hellebuyck made a couple of really good saves there in the first 5 minutes, kind of evened things out. What were your takeaways from the quick start for St. Louis?
Well, that was kind of one of the biggest things we touched on last time was how can the Blues come out and set the tone? And Claves kind of touched on it a little bit, but I felt like it was night 3 of WrestleMania to start that game. There were guys banging bodies left and right. So that was really entertaining. And I think the way that the Blues are structured up and down their roster, like checking, forechecking, back checking, winning those board battles and banging those bodies, I think is their bread and butter. So that was kind of promising to see them come out like that. But as soon as Jordan Kyrou got popped and Adam Lowry was laying some of those massive hits, it kind of, I felt like the Blues kind of stepped back and were like, okay, maybe, we'll focus on just controlling the puck and all that. But overall, like Clabe said, I thought it was a great game. I thought the Blues played really well, still neck and neck and in it until the third period. I think the biggest contrast in this game was the defenses. And there's a reason that Winnipeg was so successful this season. And they had one of the best defenses in the entire league and some huge bodies back there. Can't really get guys in front of the net. They isolate the puck. So there's still, I think the Blues did a better job of cycling pucks and getting multiple chances once they got in the zone, but still too many one and dones. And Winnipeg did a great job of not even letting them get into the zone, kind of standing the line at the blue line. So, and then on the flip side, the game-winning goal by Kyle Connor, Colton Parayko just kind of gets spun around, and you've got their leading goal scorer wide open in the slot that gets an easy feed. And, he's 9 times out of 10, he's not going to miss that shot. So I think that was the difference in this game for me personally.
The other thing that comes into play here is For the second night in a row, the Blues have gave up kind of a garbage goal. The first goal goes in off of Snuggerud. The game beforehand, it goes off of Blues defenseman. So it's one of those situations where if you take those 2 goals away, we're talking about a whole different series.
Right.
We're talking about a whole different series overall. But here's the one thing Winnipeg needs to be careful of. They're giving the Blues too much room coming out of their own end. They're not making the Blues stop and start coming out of their own end. So they have momentum going in their direction. That may come back to haunt them, because if they keep backing up in their own end, something good could happen for the Blues if you have enough forwards who want to crash the net.
The Blues drop this second game of the first round by a final of 2-1. This is Blues Hub Postgame Show on Sports Hub STL. We want to hear your guys' thoughts in the live chat. And right now, a little bit discouragement from some of our fans. Larry saying the series is over. Jacob saying the series is done. There's discouragement. So, guys, I'm going to take the personal liberty along with you all to try and encourage our fans. But let's be honest here. The historical success rate most definitely drops when you lose those first 2 games. A 12.7% historical success rate when you go down 2-0. The Blues have, John Kelly said it in the third period, have trailed in a playoff series by 2 games 18 times during their franchise's history, have come back once. That was back in 1972 against Minnesota. Now, does that matter in this case?
No.
Not necessarily. But it's more so right that the odds aren't great, right?
Well, here's the thing, though, and I obviously I want to get you guys involved in this. Did anybody bring this up last year when Winnipeg got off to a great start and then got waxed in the first round? And they might have been better last year than they were this year.
Sure.
Nobody's bringing that up. I mean, again, boys, it's one game at a time. And that's how we have to look at it. And, I know it's favorable to say, all right, they're up 2 games to none. I mean, yeah, they have an advantage. But again, the series doesn't start until you win the other guy's building.
And we know that St. Louis has had a lot of success, still carrying that home win streak right now, which has been a franchise record here, I believe. It's either 12 or 13, but St. Louis has had a lot of success in their own building, and I have no doubt that St. Louis is going to pack out all 18,006 or whatever the Enterprise Center holds. It will be a loud crowd come Thursday evening. Jacob, I want to get your thoughts here on this next discussion topic. The Blues mixed things up going into tonight's contest. We saw for the first time this season the Blues roll with 11 forwards and 7 defensemen. I know it didn't necessarily change the outcome of tonight's game. They still lost tonight. But what were your takeaways from the strategy change from Jim Montgomery tonight, rolling with the 11-7?
Short answer, didn't like it one bit. I didn't think it worked very well to try and match it. It seemed like the whole entire thing, like Claib said, trying to out, physical the other team. That's what that lineup was meant for, and it just didn't work. This is the second game in a row where they've out-physicaled them in the first 2 periods, and then come in the third, they're dog-tired. Jets are a little bit more, they got more stamina than Blues do. They're better conditioned than the Blues are, and it showed. And they just wear themselves down, trying to wear the other team down. And, that's the thing about the Jets. They are a great team. They're a physical team. They know how to fight. Now, the only reason I say that too is because on the backside, you mix up those deep pairs and you get a little bit of, just that mindfulness. Of course, everyone says you should always be able to play with whoever. And that's the truth. But at the same time, you mix up those deep pairs just a little bit, it can throw off some rhythms. And in the whole honest truth, Tucker just did not look ready to play tonight. Tucker was
he wasn't ready to play, or the experience bug that he doesn't have made the difference, where he became a little indecisive, trying to figure out, should I hit this guy? Should I play the body? Should I give him the business?
How much do you think that the early penalty that he had potentially?
Yeah, I think that had a lot to do with it. I think that had a lot to do with it, because you already saw what happened in the first game when you take a bad penalty, and Bolduc took one. Mm-hmm. And now he comes back, he takes one, and all of a sudden you're on your heels. So when you are thrown back on the ice, and you don't know when that is, because you don't know if Montgomery's going to get away from you, because he already has 6 other guys dressed out. So now you're saying, okay, How much do I want to have the puck on my stick? Let me get rid of it. He had a couple of plays tonight that just showed me that that's why they call them rookies. That's why they call them guys who have no Stanley Cup playoff experience. It shows in a game like this tonight.
Do you
On
guys,
that topic, though, I do think that, like, obviously it's not great that he kind of helped the puck go into the net on Winnipeg's first goal. But outside of that, I thought Jimmy Snuggerud was one of the best skaters on the ice for the Blues tonight. And that kind of goes into his hockey IQ level. But also, we were talking about it on the last post game, like, yes, these young guys are very inexperienced, but every single game that they gain experience in the playoffs just boosts them so much in their development. And I think the difference between Jimmy Snuggerud tonight, I mean, I could watch that shot all night. Like, obviously the result is not great and we're down 2-0, but that shot from Jimmy Snuggerud was a thing of beauty. So I think the result for him in his development from this game to last game, I think is night and day. And that's promising for me in the future for the St. Louis Blues.
You know, one of the things about Snuggerud, the book on him at Minnesota was he wasn't as good of a skater as he needed to be in the National Hockey League. He's got a good snapshot, but I thought when he tried to pull it back and tee it up, I thought that half second that it took for him to get it off was going to cost him, because normally you don't get that kind of time when you're that close to the goal in the playoffs like that. But he was able to get it back and snap it off. But I agree with you, Thomas. I thought he might have been one of the three best players offensively for the Blues tonight.
And this is what we have heard about Jimmy Snuggerud, right? Is this nasty shot that he has? It felt like tonight, gentlemen. I know it's only been 7 or 8 games now that we've seen Snuggerud up with the Blues, but it felt like this was the first time that we really saw like what that shot can be. I know you said, as you mentioned, Claves, he had that double clutch, but it just goes to show the impact that this guy is going to have down the road potentially for this Blues team.
Well, to put him on the number one line tonight says a lot about what Jim Montgomery thinks of him for a couple of reasons. Obviously, he can score, but also he's pretty sound in his own end. I mean, you can't be a one-dimensional forward at this time of the year, and that's why I think Bruce Nafish has seen his ice time diminish. He just doesn't seem where he knows where to be at this point. I mean, you can be that offside winger and look for the one-timer, but you have to do a few other things as well. And now you're seeing guys playing out of their zone with regard to playing the body more. You're seeing guys taking runs at people that you're saying, well, wait a minute, where was this at in January? Where was this at in February? You know, you just didn't see it a lot. And now they're doing it because they have no choice. And once you get out of your game, you either have to adapt or all of a sudden you become lost.
And something that, we haven't brought up yet is the timing of that goal as well, with less than 2 seconds left in the first period. They talk about those last minute goals either being life-giving for the team that's scoring them or life-sucking, right, for the team that's being scored against. And you think about the momentum that Winnipeg had built from that point, despite St. Louis playing a pretty solid first period. All momentum was on Winnipeg's side, and it felt like we were going to be going into the locker room at that first intermission very discouraged, trailing up to that point. Obviously, like I said, the Blues ended up still falling short, but being able to play it out until the final whistle, till the final horn at the intermission point, I thought that was another really good point. And I thought that if we were looking at a Blues win at the end of this one, that was going to end up being a huge reason why, sticking that one out, playing until that final horn.
I do think, circling back on the 11-7, I actually think it was kind of beneficial for the Blues, solely because we're talking about cardio, right? And if we're talking about this physicality that they play with and potentially getting gassed by the third period, which it did look like they were kind of winded at the end of last game. It also looked like Winnipeg's defense just absolutely put the clamps down once, a minute 30 seconds left. Like, it's still difficult, but it kind of reared its head tonight as well. And the Blues had more time in the third period to score, but I think they ended up with like 5 or 6 shots total in the period. So it's difficult for them to find anything once Winnipeg gets the lead and kind of puts the clamps down. But I do think the 11-7 was beneficial solely because there's a lot of games on the defense of this St. Louis Blues team, and that's where most of your veterans are, right? So if you're talking about cardio, like 9 times out of 10, like Jake Neighbors, Snuggerud, Bolduc, like those guys can probably skate for a little bit longer than guys like Nick Leddy or guys like Suter or guys that are older, so potentially putting a 7th defenseman back on that back end to kind of not only mix up those pairings, but kind of give them more wind and more legs on that back end. If you are subtracting a forward, but it did look like, I mean, we're talking about Winnipeg scoring 5 goals last game compared to 2. Like, if you're telling me that Winnipeg scored 2 goals, like, I'll take that for the St. Louis Blues. Realistically, we should be able to score 3. We just weren't able to do that tonight.
Despite facing off against one of the best team on the power play in the NHL, the Blues have been the team, at least for early in this one, that have been impressing on the man advantage. They, at one point after scoring that first goal tonight, were 3 of 4 in their first 4 opportunities here through these first 2 games. But it felt like the momentum on the man advantage following that shifted a little bit. St. Louis wasn't able to create a lot of opportunities. They go 0 for 3 on their final 3 man advantages in tonight's game. Jacob, was there anything you noticed from the first power play to the final 3 that shifted in St. Louis's play?
I mean, I think the thing that was resonating throughout the whole thing, the only difference was that last stretch of, last second urgency on that last power play that gave Snugger the time and space to shoot that puck. But I mean, the thing that a lot of people I think mix up is to get perfect shooting lanes or to just get shooting lanes. What the Blues did, it seemed like all night they're just looking to get perfect opportunities, perfect shooting lanes. That's all they're doing. They're moving the puck too much. There was multiple times Falk could have ripped one for the point, or give down to Bolduc, Thomas, someone. I mean, the simple thing is, you just got to get the puck on net sometimes, get it through some screens. But instead, they're looking for a spot where, now there's only 2 guys in front of the net, perfect screen. Now we'll shoot, maybe look for a deflection. Where, they're just wasting time. They're trying to find the perfect spot. And then eventually, after the 20th pass in a row up, at the point to the circle, one of them bounces up and it gets cleared down the ice, or it gets intercepted, read exactly how it was supposed to be. And again, it was a bunch of power plays that just they're looking for something that just is not going to happen because they're trying to do the same thing over and over again.
Jacob, does this kind of remind you of what the Blues power play used to look like in the early part of the season, where they kept trying to make the perfect pass and look for the perfect shot? Hey, listen, it's Gordie Howe used to say, the goal you don't score is a shot you don't take. And that hasn't changed. A deflection, a rebound. I mean, there's so many things that can happen when you shoot the puck. And I understand if you have one bounce off a guy and then all of a sudden it deflects out to the middle of the rink, and all of a sudden somebody has an odd man rush going the other way, that can happen too. But I just think once you get below the dot, man, you just got to be throwing rubber at somebody. And you know what? Good things happen when you shoot the puck.
Yeah, it's about making Hellebuck uncomfortable too, right?
Yeah.
Like you throw a puck on net, there's a rebound there, and there's a scramble in front of them. Like, he's freaking out. We saw that a couple times with Jordan Binnington just strong drives to the net and bodies crashing in there. Like, you get his feet moving, get him to go take a lap, get out of the crease and go back in. Who knows what kind of mojo you can kind of mess up with him. So anything to get Hellebuck out of his zone, I think, is crucial for that.
I agree with you. And I forgot to bring this up earlier. Hey, we ought to do something about trying to protect Jordan Binnington. I mean, guys is running over him like pins in a bowling alley. And the Blues aren't doing anything about it. I'm willing to take a penalty to remind the guy, hey, you can't keep running over our guy. And I'm not talking about the fourth line guy who thinks it's cute. I'm talking about grabbing Scheifele or one of their very top end forwards and say, if you get near him, if he can smell your breath, you're going to get it.
Were you surprised that didn't happen tonight? I mean, a couple of times.
They don't have anybody that does it. And Tyler Tucker's the only one who really understands that. I mean, the other guys are either too old or too nice. So, I mean, there's nobody there to right that wrong. You don't have a forward that can come back and say, hey, if it happens again, somebody on the other end is going to get it. Okay. We don't have that element. And those are the little things, especially when you get in a series like this, that if you don't have, you can have team toughness. Now, Braden Shen will do it. Sure. He's the only one who will do it. And you can't keep sending Braden Shen, who's a middleweight, out against this big, huge, physical Winnipeg team. It just, somebody else has got to do it. Sundqvist, I mean, he's big enough to do it, but he doesn't do it enough. And when he does it on his terms instead of being there when it really counts. But you can't keep having the Jets run over Binnington. You can't, it's got to stop.
Yeah. the big thing in
Walker
hockey,
is the other guy. I'm sorry. I brought up Walker. You know what? Give Walker about 5 more inches of height and about 20 more pounds, and that's your guy.
There you go. There
And
you
get
go.
him all the way from Australia. You don't have a guy. Yeah, don't get me started on that. That's my one pet peeve, especially at this. And I'm not asking a guy to fight every night,
Sure.
but you have to have a physical presence. You have to lean on a guy and say, hey, look, man, he's either going to be you or one of your guys. But somebody's going to get it if you run by my goalie again.
Well, it says something, right? When your guy that's leading the team in fights is a healthy scratch, 2/3, maybe that's a high number, but a good portion of the season, right?
Yeah, I mean, I know that there's some teams that feel you can get away with that without having a fighter, and maybe we're getting to that point. But you better have somebody who plays tough. You better have a guy who you're not sure if he's going to drop the gloves, but he just might. And
Sure.
you want to make sure you don't want to pay that price. Now, obviously, it's the first round of playoffs. You may not see a lot of that. But at some point, you have to be able to return the favor to the opposition. And Hellebuyck's a huge guy, okay? And maybe if you get him off his game and get in his head a little bit, we already know you can go top shelf on the guy. I don't understand this, and you guys have been watching hockey. Why is it when you're 6'5" or 6'6", you drop to your knees and give up the top part of the net when you don't have to? If you're a good skater, you can stand on your skates and make a lot of saves. You could be in a crouch, but these guys, as soon as the national anthem is over and they drop the puck, the guy's down on his knees. And I just don't get it on why guys don't shoot high more. And we know you can do it against Hellebuyck.
All 4 goals the Blues have scored have been on up high against Hellebuyck. So, I mean, I think that confirms that perfectly. Jacob, any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think the simple thing, obviously, I've been, around the game enough, and I've been obviously in the youth hockey circuit for quite a while. So the thing is they teach goalies to drop to the butterfly more and more, simply because, a lot more of the shots are coming low, and they say if you're just low, you cover up most of the net. That's what you need. Of course, and then you lose half the shots. Something that Hellebuyck does, which surprisingly we haven't seen as of recently. He was at one point arguably the best stand-up goaltender in the NHL. We saw, you go back to 2019, you rarely saw Hellebuyck dropping. He was arguably the best stand-up goaltender. He saved a lot of those shots up high. The only times he rarely got beat was down low, and even then, barely got beat there. And it's interesting to see him, like you said, Clay, dropping down so much. But the simple thing is that's what they teach them nowadays, and it's all the way down. And
I kind of get it, where you want to be able to stop deflections, but he's big enough to see over his defense. He's big enough to just make sure if he's in a crouch and makes his upper part bigger by not bending at the waist, he can stop a lot of rubber, man. He can stop. Well, who am I talking? This guy's going to win the Vezina Trophy, so apparently he's stopping enough rubber. But I just don't understand, and I know that's how they teach it. I remember when I'm old, so I remember when Glenn Hall used to do it, then Tony Esposito, and then a few other guys, and then we had a generation of guys. That's all they know. Even the goalie equipment is designed for guys to be able to go down. With that said, you're not making yourself big up top, and teams are, the good shooters, and we saw with Snuggeroo tonight, the good shooters find that spot, man. And you got to just keep peppering it, because the other thing about that is you don't see pucks going off for defenseman skates in the top part of the net. So if you keep shooting high, you just never know what's going to happen. Either he's going to make the save somehow, or it's going to bounce. It's going to be in the net. There's not a third option, and you just got to keep shooting the puck.
The Blues dropped game 2 by a final score of 2-1, and now we'll head back to St. Louis on Thursday, trailing in the series 2-0. A reminder that this is the Blues Hub Postgame Show on Sports Hub STL, and the Blues Hub Postgame Show is sponsored by Hot Shots and presented by DraftKings. The crown is yours. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use code STL Sports. That's code STL Sports for new customers to play. $5. Get $50 in Pick 6 credits, better payouts, bigger wins, only with Pick 6 from DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 and over. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
The Blues dropped tonight's game by a final score of 2-1. They fall to down 2-0 in the series now against Winnipeg. I'm Ethan Hannaford, joined tonight by Jacob Stanoch, Thomas Welch, and Mike Claiborne. Guys, let's talk about what we saw on what would end up being the game-winning goal tonight from Kyle Connor. Thomas, I'll go ahead and start with your thoughts on what went wrong for St. Louis on that play.
Well, it looked like a lot of guys spinning around in the slot. I think Colton Parayko was doing it, kind of watching the puck, and then kind of took his eyes off of Kyle Connor for 2 seconds, and then the puck goes by him and it's in the back of the net. Also doesn't help that it looked like Binnington's stick got caught between his legs. So as the puck is flying at Binnington, he's getting his stick pulled out of his hand. But to Claib's point, like, that's what happens when you funnel pucks towards the net. It creates chaos, and you never know what can happen. And then, like we kind of talked about, Winnipeg just kind of batten down the hatches. But Ethan, I actually have a question for you, because I saw chat was talking about like Kyrou getting blasted, right? We also saw Robert Thomas kind of get loaded up with a hit too. And then obviously we're talking about the constant pressure on Jordan Binnington, which are arguably 3 of the most important, if not the most important pieces of the St. Louis Blues. Do you get the sense that the Winnipeg Jets' top stars in Iafallo, Scheifele, and Connor are just kind of outplaying the Blues' top players right now in Parayko and Thomas and Kyrou and all of those guys, and that can potentially be a difference in the games that we're seeing right now too?
Well, perhaps. I mean, you look at game 1 and the top line for Winnipeg was responsible for 7 points in that game. And then they were impressive once again tonight. So when you look on the score sheet, they've most definitely there's been signs of them. Now there was in game 1 for St. Louis as well. I don't know if you can solely rely on what it looks like in the score sheet, but your best players are going to be the ones that have to produce for you tonight. And while St. Louis's guys look sharp in game 1 from being able to finish off opportunities, I think that a lot of it, as we've been talking about, right, it goes into putting pucks on the net, and that didn't happen enough tonight for St. Louis. So I thought that there is, in my opinion, up to this point in these guys' careers, Kyle Connor and Mark Scheifele, right, are of the proven status compared to Jordan Kyrou and Robert Thomas, who are most definitely on their way, I think, and have the potential for superstardom. And I think that we've seen Robert Thomas since the Four Nations break start to hit that status. But when you look at the status of the superstars for both of these teams, I think that you can put Winnipeg's guys in a little bit more of a proven category, and they're playing more so like it, in my personal opinion. There's been some chatter also in the chat tonight about Colton Parayko, and some people not very happy with his performance tonight. I'm curious, did you guys see anything that was lackluster tonight from the Blues' top defenseman?
You know, I think there's a couple of things here. I want to go back to what you talk about, Scheifele and Lowry, those guys. You know, they did have the best record in the league. So I think this isn't like we're taking on the Springfield Firebirds here, okay? This is a pretty good hockey club. But I think that in Parayko's case, and this is something that I'm going to be watching a little closer, you know, Parayko's a guy that you want to have on the ice against the other team's best forward because he's a good skater. Now, take into account Parayko missed how many weeks of the season because of a lower body injury? Right. So he may not be up to snuff yet, especially at the pace that this series is taking on so far. He got caught watching the game tonight, okay? And that happens when you look at guys and say, damn, that guy's good. And all of a sudden it's in your own net. So let's kind of back off of him for the fact that he's still trying to play himself into what playoff hockey looks like. When you've been on the shelf that long, you really have to take that into account. The pace is different. The game is a lot faster. Now, he's as good of a skater as there is on his hockey team. But I think when you take into account the time he's missed, it may take him an extra step or two to get himself in that zone that he needs to be in. I'll tell you the guy that I thought we'd see more of because he's a skater is Nick Leddy. Mm-hmm. Leddy can skate with anybody, but I don't know if Jim Montgomery's comfortable with him in certain pairings and certain matchups, but that's a guy you have to take a longer look at in this situation, especially when you have a couple of graybeards out there.
Someone also that we haven't talked about tonight at all is Jordan Binnington, who, I mean, at points now, I know only 22 shots on net from Winnipeg, but they had some extremely high quality chances throughout this one. And Binnington made some phenomenal saves, as did Hellebuck. I mean, both goalies were excellent tonight. What were
Ethan, let me ask you this question. You said 22 shots. Does that include the 6 rollovers that he almost had tonight when they were running into?
That's a great point. That's a great point, Claibs. I'm reading the stat sheet, which sometimes can get you in trouble. There's no doubt that both of these goaltenders were excellent tonight in the crease. But Jacob, thoughts tonight overall on Binnington's performance and keeping St. Louis in the game?
I mean, again, it's Binnington. I think the best way to frame it is Binnington played a must-win game. The Blues played a game. I mean, that's kind of like what we saw at the end of the season was Binnington's playing like, hey, we need this win. And then the rest of the team was like, okay, we can go out and try to win, but if it doesn't go our way, so what? I mean,
there's a little bit of discourage in your voice tonight, Jacob.
I'm sorry.
Come on, Jacob. It's too early, man.
I know.
Hang with me, bro.
Okay,
I was
We're gonna
throwing
drag
stuff.
him back
I'm gonna
in.
be honest. I was throwing stuff. It was not good. I'm
Claibs,
sorry. I
please.
watched too much hockey for them to just
come off the
throw away
ledge,
that
man.
period.
Come on down here. Come off the ledge. It's
Claibs,
too early.
you've been in professional sports for a long time. Offer our young Jacob some wisdom.
So this happens a lot when you see your team on the road in a hostile environment. And again, they're playing the best team in the league record-wise.
I know.
These guys are skilled players. And I mean, they have about a half dozen guys I love to see in a Blues uniform. But my point, and so here's the other thing that's really intriguing about this team. When you have a guy that gives up his captaincy and hands it over to Lowry, there's a little bit of a transition that we haven't talked about, how this team even came closer to being a good hockey club. So it's not like we're catching. It's not like a 4 versus 5 matchup. This is 1 versus 8. Okay, right. So you have to take that into account. Everything is leaning their way. They have home ice. They have the numbers to prove that they're a good team. They've been a good team from the start of the season. So with all that said, to lose tonight 2-1, I think, considering where you were the previous game, I think there's a lot more pluses. The question is, do you have enough ice packs to hand out to guys, because it was such a physical play? And a couple of days off can probably do some guys some wonder and doing well. My concern also is this, Robert Thomas is kind of playing a little bummed up right now. And Kyrou got smoked tonight. There were some guys that really got laid out. And I already mentioned what we saw with Shen. You have to wonder, will they have the recovery time? And one thing the Blues are lucky about, that the Winnipeg forecheck isn't more physical on an older defense core. They go back to get the puck, and all of a sudden they get plastered 2 or 3 times, and all of a sudden they don't go back as fast as they used to. That's something you have to be careful of, and you better have your forwards hold those guys up. Blues have done a good job of that so far, and it's also given them room to get out of their own end with little difficulty. So they have to go back and look at those little things and see how they can build on that. And once they get it and the other guys in, who wants to go to the net? Who wants to draw a penalty? Who wants to make sure he gets a shot off and somebody's there for a rebound? Those are the little things they have to do.
Comments tonight from Jim Montgomery following the loss in Game 2. As a group, we're not happy to be down 2-0, but the games are really close. There's not much separation going on right now. We need to find another level when we go home so we can be on top by a goal. And I think that we know that Jim Montgomery historically has been Mr. Positive, right? But I think that, honestly, I think that you summed it up perfectly, Claibs. This is the top team, not just in the Western Conference, but arguably in the NHL. They most definitely are on the score sheet, but also just the quality of play that we see from them. I think that perhaps Blues fans maybe underestimated how tough this series was going to be because of how well St. Louis played down the stretch, thinking that they would be able to solely ride that in to the playoffs. And the reality is that the Jets don't just stop being one of the best teams in hockey. Yes, there is all the pressure is right. It was on Winnipeg going into this series. Now a little bit of that shifts to St. Louis because you're the one trailing at this point. But that doesn't just stop. Winnipeg doesn't just stop being one of the best teams in the league just because they're running into a hot Blues team.
Yeah, and here's the other thing you got to take into account. Since the Blues beat Winnipeg in 2019, the Jets have had the paperwork on the Blues. Look at the record during the regular season when these teams have faced each other. I think Winnipeg's won, 14 of the 17 or 18 games?
Too many.
I mean,
Too many.
So this isn't something that's unusual. Winnipeg has had very good success against the St. Louis Blues. So nobody said this was going to be easy. You can count the teams on one hand who come from the 8th seed and found themselves in the Stanley Cup Finals. It doesn't happen very often, but it doesn't happen unless you win the first series. You have to start there.
Thomas, your thoughts?
Yeah, I just think that's something that you can definitely hang your hat on, right? It's like we're talking about the number 1 seed in the league going up against the 8th seed in the Blues, and we're hanging with them in every single game. And there's potentially one tweak here or there that could potentially put you over the top. Like, that's a positive result for this team in a season where you had, your expectations were rebuild, retool, hopefully make the playoffs, but we're not expecting to. And then they just kind of turned it on down the stretch. And now we've got a monster of a team that somehow was the best team in the NHL since the Four Nations break. But I think it's a little bit of hopeful wishing for St. Louis Blues fans, as well as, just the excitement of getting back in the playoffs. But it's just one little tweak that they could potentially make. And it could be as easy as like playing Winnipeg in an unfriendly atmosphere in Winnipeg with the whiteout and everything versus going back home to Enterprise, playing in front of your fans that we know Montgomery has drilled into these guys. Like it is crucial. It is adamant for you to show up in front of your fans and put on a show. So that could even just be the small tweak that you need to go home, play in front of Enterprise, get a good night's sleep, and then go out and win by a goal. It could be as simple as figuring out the power play and taking more advantage of those opportunities, because we had a couple opportunities tonight that could have put you over the top. So I don't think yes, we're down 2-0 in the series. But also I think if you look at this series, Jordan Binnington is outplaying Connor Hellebuyck in terms of the 5-star caliber saves that he's had to make. So I think on paper, if you look at it, you're like, oh yeah, like the higher seeded team is winning. Like if you're not watching the games, you could be like, oh yeah, that's definitely what's happening. But I think this series is a lot closer than people are giving it credit for. And we'll really see that put to the test when Winnipeg comes to St. Louis.
Let's take a quick look here around the league. Playoff games going on all over the National Hockey League. The Washington Capitals defeating the Montreal Canadiens in Game 1. Alexander Ovechkin with 2 more playoff goals to add to his already unbelievable resume that for both career and what he has been able to accomplish in 2025. The Los Angeles Kings currently up on the Edmonton Oilers early still in that one, just about 15 minutes in Game 1. And then the Colorado Avalanche and the Dallas Stars currently knotted at 1. Second period just getting underway. Colorado is up 1-0 in that series as well. And now we look forward to the Blues' upcoming schedule. They are heading back home to St. Louis at the Enterprise Center. They will play on Thursday night at 8:30, so they'll have the late puck drop. I will be in attendance for that one. Looking forward to seeing what the atmosphere is going to be like in St. Louis. First playoff game since 2022 for the Blues at Enterprise Center. So let's hope that they bring the energy. As we begin to wrap up here, what I want to do here, guys, is I want to hear one key from each of you, something that the Blues need to do to be able to walk away with a Game 3 win and get back in this series. The thing is that I want a different one from everyone. So I'm going to go ahead and start with Jacob, and then we'll wrap from there. One key that the Blues need to have to be able to get back into the series and win Game 3.
I won't make this long. I just want to start by pleading my case really quick. First of all, wasn't mad about this situation. Wasn't riding on everything. I thought the Blues just could have played in that third period. That was the disappointing. And obviously, I throw away 1-8 as much as possible. It's hockey team. Thought they could have had a better push. Give it or take. You look at it from a different hockey a different hockey fan standpoint. It's, everyone's, if the Jets don't play how they are, then the entire hockey world is now disappointed in the Jets or making fun of the Jets because you're supposed to be the best team in hockey and you can't do it. With that said, I think it's going to have to be another situation of set the tone and get the entire atmosphere going. That's what the Jets did these past two games. I mean, you can see when the fans in Winnipeg, through the TV and how insane it is. I have been lucky enough to be in the Canada Life Center twice in my life just for a regular season game, and it's been crazy. The playoff atmosphere there is unmatched. If we can bring that just to throw them off a little bit, like that's the kind of effect that Winnipeg fans have, is they can affect a game. And if the Jets don't have that, or if it's flipped away for them, I think that'll help out the Blues here at home. So if they can set the tone early, get it going early, doesn't have to be physical, doesn't have to be this, but just make good plays, maybe throw in some big hits, whatever it is. You got to set your tone early and get the fans into it. Take it away from the Jets, the atmosphere away from the Jets as quickly as possible.
Thomas?
My biggest thing is going back to a point that I made earlier. Focal point on Robert Thomas and Pavel Buchnevich, but it's not like I don't need Robert Thomas to go out there and have 4 assists like he did during the Four Nations. I don't need him to go on an assist streak. I don't need Pavel Buchnevich to score a hat trick. I don't need any of that. All I need them to do is go out there and neutralize Connor and Scheifele. And I think if they can do that, I think that puts the emphasis on the Blues' second line, third line, and fourth line. And I'll bet on them against the Winnipeg Jets to win the battle in the trenches and get some scoring down there, because I think we got some dogs and they've still got some injuries down there too. So I think that's the focal point for me, and that's the tweak that they can make to potentially shift the result in St. Louis. Is win the first line matchup. And that doesn't mean, like I said, it doesn't mean scoring wise. It just means neutralize their top players.
Claibs?
Well, when you talk about momentum in buildings, there's not a city in the National Hockey League that I haven't been to where playoffs, everybody's jitted up. Okay. So, and teams understand that. Blues knew that going into Winnipeg. So building presence, and I've always said this, unless those 18,000 people are going to come out on the ice and help you on the power play, doesn't really make a difference, because you're going to feel that no matter where you go. The key, I think, is 2 things. One, there has to be more net presence on both ends. You have to protect your net in front and give your goalie a chance. And B, you have to go to the other guy's net and go hard. And as far as neutralizing the opposition, this is going to come down to whose third and fourth line can do something. Because the top 2 lines are going to cancel each other out. They're going to get theirs. Blues going to get theirs. Well, what's that? And I don't think it was a mistake to have Fox out there in the last minute of the game. There was a reason why he was out there.
Right.
You got to get something out of your third and fourth lines. And if you do that, that's going to be the difference maker. And if you don't think so, go back to when Patty Maroon and that bunch and what they were able to do for the Blues in the playoffs. They lean on guys. They make them stop and start. They make them do things that takes them out of their comfort level. That way you can get a turnover and you can get your odd goal or 2 or even draw a penalty. Those are the things they're going to have to do come Thursday night.
You heard it right there. The biggest keys for how the St. Louis Blues can get back into this series with a Game 3 win as they head back home at the Enterprise Center on Thursday night, 8:30 puck drop. Looking forward to the coverage following that one as well. If you're watching tonight and you're saying something looks different about these guys, and you're seeing that Thomas no longer has hair, well, go and check out Sports Hub STL on YouTube, and you can see the process of him getting his head shaved as the Blues made their miraculous run to sneak into the playoffs to clinch that spot. And you can see him become a bald man. Claibs, I know I've been asking you for wisdom and experience tonight. As someone who is a professional also in this area, what are we thinking about? What are we thinking about Thomas's new look here?
Well, it looks okay. I mean, everybody can't go with a bald head, but it looks like Thomas is moving in the right direction here. You just got to make some decisions. Do you want a shadow? Do you want to go totally skinned? You have about 24 hours to make that decision before people start thinking you you lost a bet. You have to be either they think you lost the bet or you join the army. One of the two.
Yeah.
So
well, I showed up to work today and they were all like, "What happened?" And I was like, "I lost a bet." And they were like, "Yep, that checks out." But I do
you know what? I gotta tell you something. That's better than getting your eyebrows shaved.
That's true.
So
and there was a lot of people that were wanting me to do that, and I was like, I can't do that.
No,
that would have been rough.
Not
but I do have a lot of bald uncles too, and they gave me the confidence to not know that I would look okay doing it, but based off of like their assessment and how they looked with bald heads, I was like, I feel like it won't look awful. And then when it happened, I was like, actually, I kind of like it. My shower time is cut in half. I don't have to worry about bedhead. Like it was getting in my face because it was so long, and now it's not even a hassle at all.
The chicks dig it. It's worked for me for a long time. I got no beef with it. Okay. It's done really well for me, and it might be for you, but
this is getting off the rails.
You owned up to the bet, and that's all that counts.
Mike Claiborne, never change. We appreciate all of you guys joining in to Blues Hub Postgame Show as St. Louis drops this one 2-1, the final score in Game 2. We will be back with you following Game 3. We'll be breaking down hopefully what is a Blues victory to get back into the series. They are Jacob Stanoch, Thomas Welch, and Mike Claiborne. I am Ethan Hannaford. This has been the Blues Hub Postgame Show on Sports Hub STL.